If you've ever seen the amateur video of the immediate aftermath of the Enniskillen bomb, you know you'll never forget how horrific the images are. But of course, we can't put them to the back of our minds. But what about the people who have to live through that horror day after day, week on week, month after month, year on year? Fergal McKinney has been to Enniskillen for the Survivor's Insight, 10 years on.
November 1987. IRA terrorists prepare for a bomb attack that was to horrify the world. Their target, Enniskillen. The bomb to be detonated on Remembrance Sunday as locals gathered to honour the dead from 2 world wars. Enniskillen lies not far from the border with the Republic. The bomb was assembled there. It would take a team of about 30 to help transport it. A journey that normally takes an hour from Ballinamore in County Leitrim took many more. Along the route, IRA sympathisers scouted ahead for police and army to allow the bomb team a clear run. By early Saturday, it and the bombers were on the outskirts of the town. Among those who helped, a number of Enniskillen people, whose job it was to provide information about those who gathered on Remembrance Day. They'd also helped the terrorists scout the area and finally guided the bombers to where the device was placed in a Catholic church hall adjacent to the town's war memorial. That job was completed late on Saturday night. The bomb was to claim 11 lives. Many more were injured, some horrifically. The deep pain behind the brutal images that flashed around the world within hours of the explosion is still as raw to the people of Enniskillen 10 years later.
Well, the day began very normally. We had breakfast together as a family, and Gordon and Mary prepared to go to the war memorial. It was a damp morning, and as Mary left the kitchen, I remember looking across the yard and calling after her, "Mary, have you got an umbrella?" Because she was given to sinus trouble, and I always liked her to carry an umbrella and keep her head dry, as it were. And she said, "Of course I've got one, Mum, don't fuss." And then I went out just to see them driving off and waved goodbye to them.
We walked up the Queen Elizabeth Road. We passed some of the army along the river there. Jim joked with the army. And we went up to the corner. Stood a while behind Johnny McGaw. Couldn't see enough from there and moved on. Again, we feel if we had stayed there, we possibly could have been killed. Went round the corner, we saw Mr. Hill. We stopped, Jim said, "We'll speak to Mr. Hill." And we just stopped about the end of the railing. But we never got time to speak to Mr. Hill.
I was standing with my sister holding her hand about 20 to 11. It was a very cold, dark day. And basically people were starting to gather for the actual service of remembrance and 2-minute silence. There were quite a few people starting to gather all round. And it was, I just still remember the people I was standing with. I can still remember the exact place I was standing. So my memories are very vivid even to this day. The memories don't go away. I can deal with the pain and hurt, but the memories still stay with me.
We could hear the band starting, and we knew the parade was right, so they were actually on the move. And that was the signal for the escort onto the guard to march on to the cenotaph and take up the 4 positions. That's what happens every year. And they marched up from the Queen Street to the cenotaph. Now they had taken about 2 paces. That's when I just remember being on my hunkers, and everything was just dust everywhere, and there was utter silence. That was for about a split second, and then people were shouting, and I didn't even hear the bang.
I knew it was an explosion, but I didn't know that it was directly behind me until I was lifted off my feet and flung. It was like being flung in the air. There was a lot of things went through my mind in split seconds. Then everything went dark, black. I knew I was going to be killed because I felt rubble. But it was like wakening out of a sleep. When I wakened, I was underneath the rubble. But I was able to pull myself out and immediately went to look for Jim, who was further back. He was where I had left him. He wasn't flung out and he was covered with rubble.
I was unconscious until they started to take me, when they took me out. I felt that when I thought I was getting up myself, didn't realise I was being helped, but I put my hand up to my face and the blood was coming out of my face, and I knew I was badly hurt. And I went unconscious again, but the screams of the people was unbelievable. It was like hell. Terrified people injured, people looking for their loved ones. It was a terrible place.
About 11:15 I heard something I've never heard anything like before, nor do I ever want to hear again. The noise was unbelievably loud from behind.
There's a big bit of slab that fell down, and we were actually standing on top of it. 4 or 5 of us actually standing, and somebody says, "Oh, there was somebody underneath that." This boy was lying underneath it, just a bull lying underneath it. Everybody just moved at the one time and got this bundle out from under this. We tossed the big slab over, and we got him out.
The next memories I have are actually being pulled from the rubble, half conscious, and I can remember not being able to feel my left leg at all, and to hear the noise of various people, soldiers that were carrying me out of the rubble, and just the sheer confusion, the noise, the taste of blood in my mouth and concrete, and the fact I couldn't feel my left leg.
Unbelievable. That cub should have been dead. There must have been a bit of a block or something keeping the slab just up off him.
As rescuers searched for life in the rubble, the full horror began to emerge. 11 people in all were to die in the no-warning blast. By now, the focus quickly switched the short distance to the Erne Hospital as anxious relatives sought news of their loved ones.
I saw my neighbour, Mrs. Ross, and I said to her, she was crying gently, and I said, "Had you someone down there?" And she said, "I've lost my children." And I began to think, lost, people lost. And then I went to Gordon. He was sitting in a chair strapped up, just with his injury at this stage. And the first words he said to me, "Where's Mary?" I said, "Gordon, where is Mary? Mary left with you. Where is she?" Oh, he said, "I don't know. A wall fell on us and the pet told me she loved me." And I was totally bewildered. I didn't take that in at all.
In the confusion, people were everywhere in the hospital there were various things going on, people being x-rayed, examined. Others that would seem more of a priority to be dealt with were dealt with at the time, and I think I was somewhere where my father couldn't find me, but he virtually had to go through and look among those who had lost their lives to try and find me, so it was at least an hour and a half maybe before they actually found me, I think. That was tremendous strain on my parents.
My role that day was really to go around and make sure that everybody was being attended to, and those that were waiting for x-ray, that the patients that were ill, that they were given priority.
And as you looked around, in all of those faces on all in the
Yes.
residence, they were all faces that you knew.
Well, I knew quite a few of them, yes. Quite a lot of them I knew.
And they all...
And of course they were quite relieved to see someone that they knew as well.
I went round to x-ray, and there I saw Ronnie. Now he was covered, he was waiting to go into to be x-rayed. He was covered in a dust. He was like a very, very old man. He had a lot of facial injuries, but it was all covered in dust, and his eyes were like purple, two purple plums, you know, they were sitting out. It was all swollen. And he went in and had x-rays.
With the injury toll mounting, those most seriously hurt were airlifted to Altnagelvin Hospital.
I didn't regain consciousness till they were taking me out of the ambulance at the airport and putting me into the helicopter. And the cold from the blades and the wind of the blades brought me round. I remember saying to them, if you can't stop me shaking, I'm going to die. They took whatever clothes was on me off me and rolled me in aluminium foil. And it was tremendous. It was like being put into an oven at 90 to 100 degrees. It saved my life, calmed me down, and I went back unconscious again.
Meanwhile, back in Enniskillen, 10 people were already dead, and Mary Wilson was clinging to life by the slenderest of threads.
We knew things weren't good, and I remember standing there and looking underneath Gordon's bed, and my puppy that I'd started out with in my buttonhole was lying underneath his bed, and I thought, oh, how is this day going to finish? The next stage, another doctor and nurse came and said, your daughter is out of theatre now, into intensive care. We're bringing you up to see her. And she brought us very gently into the ward and explained that Mary's heart was just beating and no more. And I went into the room. There Mary was lying, wired up. I just couldn't believe that the girl who had left our house running across the yard full of energy, full of vitality and the joys of life, because she was looking forward to going into the maternity ward in the Royal on Monday morning to see the first one of her, to witness a birth. And she'd never seen a baby being born before, and this was going to be great excitement. And there she was, lying, and her life just ebbing away. I went over to her, I kissed her. Her eyelids flickered. I'll always see that picture, never forget it. And I spoke to her. I think she perhaps knew our voices. And Sister said, she's gone, the heart has stopped beating.
Beautiful holiday. It was a holiday we won. We were in Kenya. The animals looked so beautiful in their natural environment. And several times I did say to my husband, wouldn't it be, Mummy and Daddy would love this.
Margaret Veitch and her husband Crawford were nearing the end of an idyllic African safari when they learned of the tragedy in their hometown. But for Margaret, the news was worse than she could ever have imagined. Both her parents, William and Nessie Mullen, had been killed.
We were walking across white sands, beautiful blue skies. It was absolutely paradise. That's the only way I could describe it. And I didn't realise at that stage the terrible mayhem that was at home. And I then had to make a phone call to my sister, and I wanted her to tell me it wasn't true. But I started getting ready about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was the longest